The sun was falling low when Evelyn Hart's world split in two. The prairie, golden and endless, was alive with a hush of cicadas and the sway of tall grass. She had gone to creek with a bucket, her skirts brushing dust, her thoughts as simple as the water she came to fetch. Behind her, the small cabin where her parents worked the land smoked gently from a hearth fire. Ahead of her, the horizon burned with evening. It was a kind of hour that made you believe peace could last. But peace on the frontier never lasted. They came like storm shadows, Comanche riders cresting the ridge, their horses painted, their faces streaked with red and black. The first sound Evelyn heard was not the war cry, but the thunder of hooves rattling the ground beneath her boots. She turned, bucket slipping from her hands, and saw a dozen riders bearing down, fast as the wind itself. Her father shouted from the cabin, the crack of his rifle splitting the quiet. The shot went wide. Flames soon licked the roof as torches flew, smoke clawing up into the dying light. Evelyn's mother screamed her name, but the sound was lost in the roar. In that chaos, a figure swung down from horseback, strong arms seizing her before she could flee. Evelyn kicked, bit, clawed at leather and skin, but it was useless. She was lifted onto a horse, pressed against the chest of the warrior who had taken her. Her world blurred into motion, wind tearing her bonnet away, smoke choking her throat, tears cutting lines of the dirt on her face. She dared to look at him. His face was hard, unreadable, painted for war. Dark hair whipped around his shoulders. He said nothing, not a word, as if words were too heavy for such moments. His silence struck her harder than a curse would have. The riders carried her deep into prairie night, farther and farther from the cabin, from the flames that swallowed her home whole. Evelyn kept waiting for cruelty, for the knife, the jeer, the blow. But instead there was only the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her and the heartbeat she could feel through the chest of the man who held her. They rode for hours, the moon rising silver. Exhaustion stole her fury. Her body sagged, though her mind burned with shame. When at last they stopped, it was in a clearing where other fires burned. A Comanche camp unfolded before her eyes. Teepees lit with orange glow, children's laughter sharp against the crackle of flame, dogs weaving through the shadows. She was dragged down, placed before them all like spoils. The whispers began at once. Women eyed her with suspicion, men with cold curiosity. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself, heart pounding, her bonnet gone, her hair tangled. She was marked already, she knew, tainted in the eyes of her people, judged in the eyes of theirs. And yet, when one of the younger braves moved toward her, hand reaching as if to mock or prod, the warrior who had taken her, her captor, stepped between them. He said nothing, only looked, but it was enough. The youth withdrew. Evelyn lowered her gaze. That silent protection confused her more than hostility ever could. The night stretched on. She was given no place to sleep, no words of comfort. Hunger gnawed at her belly, but pride was sharper. When food was brought, venison roasted on a stick, she refused it, clutching her knees to her chest. She would not eat the food of those who burned her home. Later, when the fires dimmed and the camp settled, she noticed him again, the warrior. He crouched by the edge of the fire, sharpening a blade. In the flicker, his face looked carved from stone, but his eyes, dark, steady, kept drifting toward her. Not unkind, not cruel, simply watching. When he rose, he crossed the space between them and placed a small strip of meat near her feet. No words, no gesture force. He turned and walked away. Evelyn stared at the offering until the cold grew sharp in her bones. When at last she ate, it was alone, the silence around her thick as the prairie night. That was how the days began. Her fear a constant, her shame a cloak she could not shed, and the warrior's silence heavier than iron chains. At night, under the vault of stars, Evelyn lay on the ground and wondered if this was what it meant to be lost, not simply stolen from place, but stolen from who you once were. She closed her eyes and told herself he was her captor, nothing more. And yet, when she dreamed of chains, they were not iron at all. They were eyes, his eyes, that never turn away. The days that followed blurred into one another, stitched together by hunger, silence, and the endless sky. Evelyn Hart, once a settler's daughter with calloused hands and hopeful eyes, now lived as a shadow in the Comanche camp. She fetched water, stumbled over unfamiliar tasks, and endured the stares of women who measured her worth and found it wanting. Every step she took reminded her she was neither free nor fully bound, an in-between thing, prisoner, outsider, stranger in a circle of firelight. And yet, each morning she woke to find her body whole. No hand struck her, no cruel jeer forced itself into her ears. Instead, there was only the steady presence of him, the silent warrior Takota. He had taken her from everything she knew, but he did not strip her dignity piece by piece as she feared he might. If anything, he seemed to guard it, quietly, fiercely, in ways she could not understand. One afternoon, Evelyn carried a clay pot to the riverbank. The pot was heavy, her arms thin from days of poor eating. She slipped on the damp stones, the vessel crashing and shattering at her feet. The sound cracked like a rifle shot across the camp. Heads turned. Whispers rose. Shame scorched her cheeks as she bent to gather the shards. That was when a shadow fell over her. She stiffened, expecting mockery, or worse. Instead, Takota crouched beside her. His large hands gathered pieces gently, laying them in her palm one by one. He did not speak. He did not stay. When the last shard was returned, he rose and walked away, leaving her trembling with something far more confusing than fear. It was not kindness, not exactly. It was something quieter, something that pressed against the walls of her chest, demanding to be named. Life in the camp taught her new rhythms. Evelyn learned to braid horsehair into rope, to grind corn with stones until her shoulders ached. She watched Takota one evening sit by the fire, his hands steady as he wove a length of rawhide. The next day, he left a small bundle near her place, a strip of horsehair rope already half-braided. At first, she stared at it, suspicious of any hidden meaning. But later, when he returned, she picked up the rope and fumbled through the braiding. He did not guide her with words, only with his hands. Sitting across from her, waiting until she copied. Their eyes met briefly, and something passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that she had tried, that he had seen. Small exchanges became their language. He left food near her sleeping place. She left berries she'd gathered where he would find them. He carved small wooden figures by firelight, bison, wolf, hawk. One morning she woke to find a bird, delicately shaped from cedar, resting by her blanket. She traced its wings with her fingers, feeling both captive and cherished. The women noticed. They whispered more sharply now, their eyes cutting like knives. One elder, Nokomi's, warned Takota that he was walking the edge of dishonor. Evelyn heard the words in fragments, but she understood enough. She should have felt relief, proof that she was still only a prisoner, an unwanted burden. Instead, her heart twisted. She was ashamed to know she had cost him respect. Ashamed, too, of the flicker of warmth inside her at the thought that he might see her as more than spoil of war. The bond deepened not with declarations, but with need. When the fever came, it struck swift as a rattler. Evelyn's body burned, shivering with heat though the night was cool. She curled on the ground, unable to lift her head. She expected to be left, to fade as another forgotten settler girl swallowed by the prairie. But she was not left. Takota stayed. Through her haze, she felt the press of a damp cloth against her forehead, the cool trickle of water at her lips. She heard a low voice whispering words she could not understand. All night he kept vigil, his shadow steady against the fire's glow. Evelyn dreamed of her mother's lullabies, of prayers whispered over her cradle. When she woke, her eyes cracked open to the morning sun, and there he was, still at her side, exhaustion in his face but no thought of leaving. Her lips parted, the word almost escaping her, why? But her voice was too weak. She let her gaze answer instead, a question wrapped in gratitude. He answered with nothing more than silence, and yet it was the kindest silence she had ever known. After that night, something shifted. When she walked through the camp, her shoulders straightened. When she fetched water, she no longer trembled under the weight of stares. Takota did not shield her openly, but she felt his presence like a wall at her back. And when he passed by her side, their hands almost brushed, never touching, but close enough that the space between them throbbed with a quiet, unbearable tension. It was not love, not yet. It was something slower, something born in hunger and shame, in small mercies exchanged beneath an endless sky. A thread was being woven between them, fine and invisible, but strong enough to hold against the storm that was coming. That night, she held the wooden bird he had carved and wondered at the strangeness of her heart. Once, she would have prayed for her people to come and rescue her. Now she did not know which terrified her more, the thought of staying or the thought of being taken away. She closed her eyes under the wide prairie stars and felt the bird's smooth wings beneath her thumb. He was my captor, she told herself. And yet, when fever burned me to ash, it was his hand that kept me tethered to this world. And for the first time, Evelyn wondered if perhaps her chains were turning into something else, something she was no longer certain she wanted to escape. The prairie had grown softer with summer when the threat returned. Days had turned into weeks, and Evelyn no longer counted them. She moved through the Comanche camp with surer steps now, her hair braided differently, her skirts patched by unfamiliar hands. At night, she sat by the fire with Dakota near, the carved bird always close in her palm. But peace is fragile on the frontier, a glass vessel too easily shattered. Word came one evening, carried by scouts. The settlers were near. A small band had been seen trailing the river, rifles strapped across their saddles, vengeance burning in their eyes. Evelyn felt her blood turn to ice. She knew that look. Her people did not come to rescue. They came to reclaim what pride they thought they'd lost, and to punish. The camp murmured with unease. Some said she should be given back, returned before blood could spill. Nokomis, the elder, spoke harshly. She is not of us. Her presence is a danger. Better to send her away. Evelyn heard those words, each syllable a knife. She had known she was not fully accepted, but hearing it aloud crushed her spirit. For a moment she imagined herself walking back into the arms of her people. But in that imagining, she saw their faces, eyes that would look not with welcome but with shame. To them she was spoiled, ruined, a woman marked forever by the hands of the enemy. And in her chest rose a quiet truth she could not deny. Her dignity lived not in their judgment, but in the silence of the man who had guarded her without asking for anything in return. The settlers came at dawn. The first shots cracked across the still air, scattering birds into sky. Horses screamed. Children cried. Warriors sprang to their feet. Smoke rose as bullets tore through the edges of the camp. Evelyn crouched behind a wagon, her breath shallow. Fear clawed at her throat, but another feeling fiercer roared in her chest. She could not lose him. Through the chaos, she saw Dakota mounted, spear in hand, his voice finally breaking silence with a cry that shook the ground. He fought with ferocity, each movement sharp as lightning. A settler's bullet grazed his shoulder, but he did not falter. His eyes found hers once through the madness, steady even as war roared around them. A figure broke toward her. Elijah Crow, a settler she knew from a neighboring farm, his face twisted with fury. He grabbed her arm roughly, yanking her up from cover. "Evelyn," he shouted, voice cracking with something that sounded like triumph. "We're taking you home." Home. The word should have lit a flame in her chest. Instead, it fell foreign on his tongue, jagged and false. She wrenched against his grip, shaking her head. "No!" she rasped, voice hoarse but firm. Crow's eyes widened in disbelief. "You don't know what you're saying. They poisoned you. You belong with us." Her heart pounded as she looked past him, looked at Dakota, who fought like a storm-given flesh, blood dark on his arm. The choice was no longer hidden. It burned inside her clear as the rising sun. "I belong where I am seen," Evelyn whispered, and then louder, to the heavens themselves, "Dakota." The settler jerked back in shock, his grip faltering just long enough. Dakota surged forward, knocking Crow aside. The two men clashed, steel against flesh, a brutal struggle in the dirt. Evelyn's cry pierced the air as Dakota staggered under a blow, blood staining the ground. But he rose again, fierce and unyielding. With one final strike, Crow fell, the rage in his eyes dimming into dust. Silence followed, broken only by the ragged breaths of the living. Evelyn knelt beside Dakota, her hands trembling as they pressed against his wound. The camp gathered, watching. This time, she did not hide her care, did not bow her head in shame. She lifted her chin, her voice steady though her heart shook. "You ask why I call for him," she said to the eyes around her. "Because he is mine." A hush fell over the camp, deeper than the silence of fear. Something in her words carried weight. Not the tone of a prisoner, but of a woman who had chosen her place. Takota's eyes opened at her touch. Weak but alive, he looked at her as if she were both the battle and the peace that followed. In his hand, slick with blood, he pressed a small wooden bird into her palm, as if reminding her of every unspoken word between them. This time, Evelyn did not just take. She gave. Her fingers laced through his, holding tight. No shame, no hesitation. Only belonging. When the settlers fled, beaten back into the horizon, the camp gathered what remained. Smoke curled, blood dry, but Evelyn stood tall beside Dakota. She was not given back. She was not cast aside. She had chosen, and in choosing, she had been claimed not by force, but by her own will. That night, under the stars, she sat beside him, his hand warm in hers. The fire burned low, the prairie stretched endless, and for the first time since the world had shattered, Evelyn fell whole, reflective closing. And so it was that a settler's daughter, taken as a prisoner, found not chains but something else in the silence of a Comanche warrior. Love had not come as thunder, nor as sweet declarations, but as a rope braided from 100 small gestures. Meat left by a fire, a bird carved from wood, a hand cooling fevered skin. If you listen to the old songs of the prairie, you may still hear it, that truth whispered in the wind. Belonging is not always where the world tells you it must be. It is where your dignity is guarded, where your heart is steady, where your hand is held when the storm breaks. Remember this, traveler. Home is not a place carved on a map. Home is the hand that chooses yours.